What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Bischoff and Brown right here on the Detroit Lions podcast. He's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. We are back. Episode 999. I don't know really what we're on, but it's been a lot. Scott, my man, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. We are good. Back at it. We took last week off, kind of decompress from free agency, allow everybody to digest some of the content that we've been doing on that. But we're back talking draft today. And the position that we're talking about for today it's going to be wide receivers, but I just want to have a really broad conversation or question, I guess I should say I have for the people is, are the Lions really going with need at pick 28, or are they going to go with the best player available? And I mean, we've seen it over the years. Aiden Hutchinson was a need. Drafting Tyrion Arnold was a need, but they've rolled the dice a little bit, taking guys like Jack Campbell, who didn't really appear to be a need at that moment in time, but we see the value in having him when Alex Anzalone got hurt and Derek Barnes got hurt. You needed a guy like that. So good thing they grabbed him. Then you have Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw what's going on with J-Mo and the progress that he's had. So there's always been this kind of back and forth of like, what would the Lions do in this situation of going with either need or best player available in this year's draft? And I think the more and more that I look at their roster, I genuinely feel like just going best player available is the direction that the Lions are going to go. And they're kind of the wild card at the back end of the first round. I mean, it's always a guessing game with every team, but particularly with the Lions, you don't know which way they're going to go because they do have, the need for another pass rusher opposite of Hutch. And they could look at another safety if there was one that was tempting them. I don't think Malachi Starks will be there, FYI, for everybody. But I think best player available is really interesting for them if they were sitting there. And I just wonder, would wide receiver potentially be the best player or best position available on the board for them at pick 28? So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think?
Well, it's a good conversation to have because looking at their roster, they've built this out in, say, the last 4 years or so. And we are about 4 weeks away from the draft. So, we're kind of getting pressed here a little bit. But the Lions roster is pretty developed, right? So yes, they need an edge presence. They need to draft an edge player, right? Maybe even two. Maybe this is the year they double down at this position because Holmes seems to dig doing that. But at pick 28, and I think we've just kind of addressed this throughout the entire process. It may, what falls to you might not be great. And you might feel like you're completely reaching on an edge player at 28. So then it is truthfully best player available. And if they choose to believe that it's a receiver, I think it's, obviously receiver is a priority position in the NFL these days. And finding one late in the first round that can produce for you for a while would be a very productive thing to have. Right. So, the idea is that the draft is not over after round one. So you don't want to take a player at 28 that you can get at 60. But looking at the roster, I think you need an edge. You need a interior offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know that you're doing that at 28. If they find value there, that's fine. But receiver's intriguing. You have Tim Patrick, who's back on a 1-year deal. They have, for the longest time, tried to find that big outside presence, big fast out, whether it's Brashad Perriman or Donovan Peoples-Jones or Tim Patrick now. Can't remember the other. There's just little guys.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Josh Reynolds was another guy.
Yeah. So that's the prototype. And it seems like that's what they want in a big outside receiver. So I think paying attention to some of that stuff is important, but it's the NFL and having more weapons available than less is better. Right. So, just from the idea alone that receivers produce, and they're very valuable and they're making a ton of money.
Yeah.
And you'd be getting a guy at the end of round one that you'd have for potentially 5 years. It's intriguing. So, I like it. I like the idea.
Yeah, and I think if you and you, I'm glad you mentioned the 5 year part. Like you just signed Amon-Ra St. Brown to a contract extension, the 4 year extension, but you still got to pay JMO. We know we're going to pay Hutch, but the money that is available down the road is going to shrink up relatively fast. We've been hearing the conversations already of, well, if they don't bring back Kirby Joseph, they're going to need a safety in the mix. Could they be intrigued by Andrew Makuba or somebody else there at the safety position? All of that's very intriguing, but when you look at wide receiver, as you mentioned, there's not really much behind JMO and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I like Tim Patrick, and I'm not discrediting him and what he's done, but there's limitations within his game.
Yeah.
And we all know at any moment that guy could roll an ankle and be done for the year. Like that's just the history of who he is. And as much as I like Khalif Raymond, he's not getting any younger. He's had back-to-back seasons of essentially ending the regular season on injured reserve, and he makes his way back. But you need to have a little bit more there. And I just wonder, is this a bigger need than we're giving credit for? And at the end of the day, we're going to label it as best player available. But on the Lions board and in their rankings and in the way that they value their roster, it might be the top need on their board. And we just don't believe it yet. So I think if you can get a rookie on a 5 year deal at pick 28, I think it's really a kind of I don't want to say a no-brainer for Detroit, but it kind of is a no-brainer, like with the way that their roster is structured for what's been going on. So I think that the next part is the next question. And it's like, could the Lions have any interest in a player that seems to be falling out of the first round completely? And that's Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden at pick 28. I look at his skill set, and I think he's one of the 15 best players in this draft. I think he's probably the third best receiver in this draft. But there's people out there that do what we do, and they think he's the best receiver in the draft. But if you can get him at pick 28 and you can play him in multiple spots in your offense, I just wonder, does he have a little bit more value? And there's this concern of like, maybe there's some off the field stuff, some work ethic stuff with him. I went back to his freshman year. They said he was like a sponge. He's a guy that really wanted to learn the offense at Missouri, and he got better every single day. So I don't know if I really buy into the work ethic stuff, but even if it is true, hypothetical, it is true. Okay, it's true. We're looking at a player that went to school in St. Louis, stayed local for college at Missouri. Maybe he just had too many distractions. I mean, there's distractions, and we see it with, look at JMO. He's got some things off the field that concern us, but he's still here. So I just wonder, is it one of those things where they value a player like this because he fits their offense in the short and intermediate areas of the field, and they could use him vertically? So I really wonder, is Luther Burden a guy that makes a lot of sense for them at pick 28?
Just from a talent standpoint, the idea of adding, if you were to tell me last year at this time that in a year the Lions are going to add Luther Burden and to that offense, you would say, what the hell happened? Right? Like, what fell apart in the course of one season that the Lions drafted so early that they got Burden?
Yeah.
The problem is, and I don't know, I haven't heard anything about the off the field stuff, but take that with a grain of salt, because it's not like, whatever. It's
Well, not everybody's sharing all that stuff anyways all the time. It's kind of an agent saying one thing or a scout saying another thing, and
it feels a little greasy to talk about, like talking about Mike Green, right? And some of the history there, and they're talking about the issues with James Pierce. It's like, well, you hear these things. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know anything about the Burden off the field stuff. The stuff I do know is that this year he was a gadget, and sort of a manufactured catch type weapon in the Missouri offense. Some of that is definitely on the quarterback. Like, the quarterback did not help Missouri's weapons last year. But, when you look at his production and how many of his catches, I want to say 75% of his college catches have come within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. To me, that Burden seems like a slot receiver who needs who needs a two-way go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that way he's not dealing with press or tight coverage. And then you need to manufacture touches for him. Now I don't want to say he's Debo like because I don't think he's like a bowling ball like Debo was.
Right.
But the usage is going to have to be something like that, where
Yeah.
is he redundant with Amon-Ra St. Brown because they both would have to play out of the slot? Yeah, I think he is a little bit. Um, I think there's some concentration drops at times with him. Um, you know, he's not overly big where he doesn't have that going for him, but I think that he's physical, he's hard to tackle. He doesn't look like a guy to me who struggles working in the middle of the field where there is physicality and contact. When there are times when he does run, vertical routes, he does a good job of stacking defenders. I think he's a really good athlete. He seems like a very explosive kind of player, you know. I think he's going to be a yards after catch kind of monster in the NFL if it works for him, and that's kind of what he's going to need to be. So, and with what the Lions are doing now, is he a fit? Not a great fit, but he's a very talented, he's an uber talented athlete who I think is more running back. I want to call him like a DJ Moore like player.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's totally fair to either of them, but if you're forced, like we saw DJ Moore get forced outside, specifically this year, right? And it just did not work.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's what you're going to see with Burton too. He needs to be in the slot. You need to manufacture touches for him. You need to give him jet sweeps and end arounds and that kind of stuff just to keep him involved. Maybe that's where the off the field stuff is a desire to be more involved in their offense and for it to be better than it was. But I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I think he's a very talented guy.
Yeah.
And adding a player like that at 28 is very intriguing, but does he fit the Lions perfectly? I don't think so.
I don't think he fits perfectly, but I don't know if you need a guy that fits perfectly when you've got Amon-Ra and J-Mo and Laporta and Patrick. Like, I think you can manufacture those touches for him in this offense because you have so much around him. I mean, if David Montgomery's going to wear down by the time we get to the end of the season, and I know he got banged up kind of on a freak play, but if we don't see him near the end of the season and it's just the Jahmyr Gibbs show out of the backfield, I'm not saying you're giving this guy 15 carries a game, but now you're taking a little bit of pressure off of Gibbs because you now can go 4 wide and you have a threat in the short and intermediate areas of the field where Amon-Ra, yes, he is that threat as well, but he can also run deeper down the field and he's just open everywhere. So
yeah,
this, I think, spreads you out even a little bit more. I don't know what the Missouri Pro Day results were. I'm looking them up right now. Because I don't even know if Burden.
Well, he ran 4.41 on that slow track in Indy, so he's fast. I mean, there's no issues with his speed, his quickness, any of that stuff. Nothing.
Yeah,
the only thing I would say is that if I'm manufacturing touches for somebody, I want it to be for J-Mo. That's
fair.
all, right?
No, and that's fair. I think the thing though too is like we're starting to see that development with J-Mo where timing is becoming a thing on crossing patterns and the things that we talked about all year long. So I think if you were going to manufacture those touches, you could start giving it to somebody else because it just feels like J-Mo is starting to put himself and wedge his way into a solidified number 2 spot as a pass catcher in the offense where you need somebody that can do a little bit more. And like, I'm glad you mentioned DJ Moore because Luther Barden 6 foot 206, ran a 4.41 like you mentioned. DJ Moore 6 foot 210, ran a 4.42. I think it kind of really fits. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting myself too excited over this one, but I don't know. I'm really curious how the Lions will value him when it's all said and done. I completely agree on the short area stuff. You're going to see him from 10 yards and less more often than not. But yeah, I love guys that can give me alignment versatility. I want to move guys around. I want pre-snap motion. I want to be able to do those types of things. And Burden provides that because he is a threat before the snap even begins, because you're going to put them in, exit motion, which the Lions love to do, glide motion, all kinds of different ways, jet motion, whatever. So
yeah, to me, he's the kind of player who, if they decide to take him at 28 and Brad Holmes and Campbell walk to the podium and they explain to you, this is what we envision him being inside our offense. I don't think it's going to take a long time for fans to jump on board with that, right? Like it's an exciting kind of move. I don't necessarily think I don't think he fits perfectly or great, within their offense. But if they have a plan and they have the creativity and the ability to figure out how, where, kind of stuff, who am I to argue with that, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about a really insanely athletic player who on film looks at times insanely athletic. There's room inside an offense for that guy. Is it just, does it feel like you're forcing it? I don't know, but I think there are other players who probably fit exactly what the Lions are looking for better than Burden. They're just not quite the specimen that Burden is, right? Athletically, he is a premier athlete.
yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, obviously, we'll see what happens when we get to that part of it, but we would love to know what you guys think. So, of course, you can comment below here on YouTube. And while you're doing that, you can, of course, rate, review, and subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all other podcast platforms. But just switching gears, taking a dive a little bit deeper, I guess, into the wide receiver tiers that we have for the NFL draft. I think we can agree that probably Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, Ted McMillan, those guys will probably be gone by the time we get to pick 28. I would have to imagine. I don't see any which way that especially Ted and Matthew Golden. I don't know if those guys are going to be like, there's no way they're going to be there. Like, there's just way too many teams that need wide receiver, and also could kind of afford the luxury of taking one of those types of players. Now, I think Matthew Golden's fascinating. I'm really curious where you are with Matthew Golden, if you've watched him, because I know there's no denying the 4.29 speed and what he has, but I'm very fascinated by him because I don't think I'm going to be as high on Matthew Golden as some of the other people in the draft world.
Yeah, he is. It's interesting because, watching him and watching Isaiah Bond run I would have bet a lot of money that Bond was faster than Golden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just because it just doesn't show up, on film like he does. I thought, well, he's plenty athletic enough and all that stuff, but Bond is really fast on their film. So, to me, notes, he's explosive. He's an explosive mover, capable of winning all over the field. Sets up defenders really well, using different kinds of foot pacing and adjusting his tempo. He is a playmaker with the ball in his hands, runs past defenders with speed, but also wins with really good footwork and route running detail. Needs to add strength to allow him to play outside and win at a high level. He has an impressive body of work at Texas, playing in big games, big moments. His speed forces defenders to honor him, and he cuts sharply and flattens. Separation looks very easy at times. And then last thing was that he makes highlight reel plays and spectacular catches. He's a very fun player to watch. All that said, yes, I think he's long gone before the Lions pick because he did run what he ran, and he is a fairly polished, detailed route runner. I think there's a world in which he is wide receiver too. In this class, I think Emeka Egbuka is probably wide receiver 3 in this class. And the reason we're talking about Burden being available at 28 is because those 3 guys went in front of the Lions at 28, where, I just think that's a reasonable way to look at those 3.
Right.
Let's talk about Tet for a little bit, because I know you have a take or multiple take. Let's talk about him.
Yeah.
This is going to be interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, Tet, just for everybody out there, Emeka Buke is my number one ranked receiver. He's 10th overall player on my board. It should not surprise anybody at this point. I think I've talked about it a couple times on the show already. I like guys that can separate. I like guys that show growth over time from a period of their career. And I think Emeka has done that tremendously over any receiver in this draft. And I only say that because I was not a fan of him 2 years ago. I did not like his game. I liked Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba way more than I liked him. And I really thought he played stiff then. I didn't think he looked as fast. I didn't think he had the burst that I was looking for. And he still is limited, I think, after the catch at times. And I'm talking about Emeka. But at the same time, this guy, he just gets open. He separates and he finds ways to get open, and there's value in that in the NFL. But looking at Tet McMillan, and again, I'm not discrediting him, 12th overall player on my board, second-ranked receiver, still really like him. My biggest problem is he's got 31.5-inch arms, and I just really don't know if a guy that is 6'4", 219 pounds, running in a 4.5 range is going to consistently create separation at the next level. And it's like, okay, well, he's got great body control. He wins at the point of, he high points the football. He makes great adjustments to the football. He can do so many different things. But at the same time, we're talking about a bit of an outlier here because we're not talking about T. Higgins or Mike Williams or some of these other receivers that have longer arms. Okay, you want to throw Drake London out there because they were also 219 pounds. That's fine. Drake London had 33-inch arms. Michael Pittman, 32.5. Mike Williams, 33 3/8. Like, these guys were able to create that separation. So when they went to go high point the football, the ball wasn't here at their, right at their chest. It was a little bit further away. So guys couldn't always make a play at the catch point because they couldn't reach that far. Now they're going to be reaching. I mean, we're talking about the best defenders in football, not the best defenders in the Big 12, where it's always a down defensive year in and year out, or the Pac-12, where you play USC and they have no defense. You know what I mean? Like, you're playing the best of the best. And that's my concern with Tet McMillan. And it's like the only player that really even came close to him as far as like pro comparisons with size was Eric Decker. And it's like, he doesn't play the game the same way as Eric Decker does. So I just wonder with Tet, like, are you taking him at, like, just throwing New England out there as an example? Are you really going to take a guy like that at 4th overall and really think like, oh, this guy's going to create a crazy amount of separation? He shows he can't do it all the time vertically. He's got really good run after the catch ability. He wins on dig routes. He can attack the middle of the field. I love all that stuff with him. I don't know. I just wonder, is the expectation a little too high for Tet McMillan? I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's a Hall of Famer, but that's where I'm at with him.
I mean, the arm length is definitely a thing. He is, to me, it's like watching receivers separate, especially when you're talking about the whole contested catch thing. There are people who want to describe him as a contested catch possession receiver only. And it's like, yeah, I get it. I could see that he is a contested catch player. He's really good at it. But there's also an element of him separating where he wins with, not necessarily even in the air, but with his body, right? So I think if you put him in a situation where a quarterback is willing to throw into where where McMillan has leverage, he is going to put up silly good numbers year in and year out, because he's going to require lots of target volume, but he does need a quarterback who will do those things, right? Because, at 6'4" and 2, I think he was like 219, whatever he was.
Yeah.
Running in the low 4.5s. Yeah, it's plenty fast. He's plenty fast enough. It's just that, you have concerns about the arm length, and I think it's reasonable because coverage is tighter, it's more physical, it's all those things. I see him, and I see what I think is probably a player who fits in last year's draft with Marvin Harrison going, Malik Neighbors going, and Rome Odune's going. I think he goes right after that group, right? So just as a perspective about, I think he and Rome probably are going to be talked about in a similar way. To me, he's a really good route runner. He's got plenty of quickness, again, for a bigger guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he's outrageously fast, but you can see him run away from defenses. He does it a lot.
Yeah.
I think that he understands how to again, pacing his his steps to create separation. Um, his speed looks fine to me. Where he wins, I think, is his understanding of how to get open. Like there are multiple times where he'll run a dig, and maybe let's just as an example, the quarterback is kind of flushed out of the pocket. And instead of just running that dig, he's now running somewhere else because that's where the openings are, right? That's where the space is. So when I see him run routes against zone, I think he's going to be pretty dominant against zone. I do. I think the arm length thing that you're talking about is going to be evident when he gets pressed, because he may not have the ability to get off of press coverage because he's going to have shorter arms than every defensive back he goes against, or close enough, right? Like,
Yeah.
A lot of really good defenders who are good at press do have longer arms, so they're gonna get him to turn, and they're gonna steer him into positions on the field where it might not be advantageous for him.
Yeah.
But I think, again, just like with some of the other guys in this class, I think there's a lot of yards after catch in his game.
Yeah.
There's a lot of basketball in his game where
Yeah.
you can see that he's played basketball, and not only is he an elite jumper, but it's like, all right, shot goes up and it's coming off one side of the rim. So my first step is to leverage myself to where I've got an advantage to get the ball because it's coming off of this side of the rim, kind of stuff. I think he does that stuff in his route running, especially not ad-libbing, but I think there's some of that in his game. I think that obviously we see the highlight reel stuff and the silly catches he makes and all that stuff. He's long gone before whenever. I mean, he's a top 15 player easily in this class. I think Carolina's an intriguing place for him. I think he is a wide receiver one who needs a lot of target volume, but needs he needs a quarterback who's going to be able to read the leverage of the receiver and put the ball into positions for him to win and make plays. But that's just because, I mean, that's the kind of receiver he is. If he was a low 4.4s, if he was if he was high 4.3s, low 4.4s, then you're talking about a guy who would have been in consideration to be a 5th or 6th overall last year.
Yeah.
But that's not his game. So, I like him. I like him plenty. I think he's an excellent prospect, but he's not the perfect prospect. And that's why we're talking about him in this class, the way we're talking about it.
And I think the thing is too, is like the expectations have gotten a little bit more realistic with him. Like back in the summer, fall, he was labeled consistently as like 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th best player in this draft. And now I don't think that's really the case. Maybe for some people he is, and that's fine. You want to gamble on that, that's fine. But you bring up a good point. Like if he went to a place like Carolina, that'd be a good fit. If he went to a place like New Orleans, I don't know if that is a good fit for him. I don't know if I trust Derek Carr to put the ball in a place for him to get it consistently and win with leverage and those types of things. Now, if he goes and lasts to Chicago and he's paired with Caleb Williams, that terrifies me because that would be a great fit. So I think that's the big thing with him. And that's a case with any player, right? Like fit. Where do they fit?
Yeah.
I look at New England, and I'm not discrediting Drake May by any means. I think it would be a fine fit, but you're rolling the dice for a guy that, again, the arm length is a bit of a concern, but he's still, as you mentioned, great player, should be fine. So I think it'll be very interesting. But we're talking about players that probably aren't going to be there for Detroit, but we still wanted to talk about them, give them their their due diligence or whatever, their kudos, their credit, their flowers. But players that I think outside of at the top, going into the next tier, we mentioned them before the show. We got 2 Iowa State guys that maybe are not being really talked about at the back end of the first round that maybe they should be. And one of them for me is Jalen Noel, who I think is one of the 32nd, 33rd best players in this draft. I think he's a top 35 type player in this draft. Probably a little bit more of like a slot receiver in the NFL. but I just love what he can do. He's got great tempo in his routes. He's got great just overall speed. He's explosive after the catch. I love the separation that he has at the top of his routes. I'm really intrigued with him, and I know he's kind of redundant to Amon-Ra St. Brown in a sense because I see a lot of similarities within his game, but we've talked about this. God forbid you have 2 Amon-Ra St. Browns on your team. If you had 11 Amon-Ra St. Browns on your team, you might be 16-0 or 17-0. I mean, the guy's a dog. So
Yeah,
I just wonder.
I think you have nailed it with him. It is hard to see him flopping, right? Just because of the way he runs routes, the dog the way he plays, right? Like, just his playing style and the detail and the size and the physicality and all that stuff. It's really tough to see him flopping. He's a really good player.
He is.
And he's a fun player. He's one of those guys where, like specific to McMillan, the destination is really important. I don't think it necessarily was with Harrison, and I don't think it was at all with Neighbors, and I really don't think it was too much with O'Duns either, right? I don't think those guys, the destination was all that relevant. They were going to be really good pros. I think McMillan will too, but he's a little more destination driven.
Right.
Noel to me looks like a guy who's going to play out of the slot and be pretty damn productive for an entire career. And, is that redundant with St. Brown? Yeah, it is a little bit, but, where are you taking him? I don't think we're talking about taking him necessarily at 28, but in a scenario, let's say you go back to 35, somebody comes up to 28 and you go back to 35. Is it the worst thing in the world if you take Jalen Noel, whatever? No,
I don't think so at all.
Yeah. Really good player. And, across on the other side of the field from him is the guy who I think fits the Lions literally perfectly. And that's Jaden Higgins.
Yeah.
And, if you want to talk more about Noel, go ahead.
Good.
Sorry,
no, you're good. I completely agree with where you're going here because I think this is the player that is exactly what they're looking for from size, speed, fit, getting the timing down of throws. The floor is yours, my friend.
Well, it doesn't need to be mine. It's just like we both could see it with him. He is big. I want to say he's like 6'4" and 215.
Yep.
He's fast. He's got enough quickness and agility in his route running where you can see him win all over the field. He's got really long arms, or at least he looks like he has really long arms. You can see the detail. Sometimes it's a thing. Like you think a guy's got really long arms and they don't. It's weird. He's got really good detail in his route running where a lot of taller, longer receivers struggle to snap off routes.
Yeah.
They got to gear down, extra steps. He doesn't do any of that kind of stuff. He does have really impressive start-stop stuff for a bigger guy.
Yep.
He will, because he chews up cushion pretty quick, he will force a defender, too deep in his pedal and just kind of snap off like a comeback type of route on the boundary. And it's like, not only is a defender not ever going to get through his body to make a play on the ball, but he's sort of left the defender grasping at air kind of thing to stop, to then get out of his pedal and close. And the ball's there. One of the other, some of the nice details is he will work back to the quarterback.
Yes.
So on top of all those things that are good about what he does, he's working back to the quarterback to make throws even easier.
Yeah.
He uses his body and will lean into a defender at the stem of his route to kind of bump them a little bit. And it's just a super intriguing nuance to his game.
Mm-hmm.
Creates more separation, right? So in the end, I think you're looking at a very big, quick and fast guy who will be a chain mover for an offense as a possession type player who is going to hit home runs every once in a while. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Right.
The number one note I had on him, the first thing I wrote down was veteran nuances to his game. He plays like he's been in the league already for 4 or 5 years, and it's really intriguing. And there is a connection to Iowa State. The Lions tight end coach is a former assistant coach, running back coach from Iowa State, Tyler Rowell, who is a great coach. Tons of great coaching stuff on him on the internet. If you can come across this stuff, if you're a football coach, check it out. And I'm only saying that because I'm a tight end coach. But Jaden Higgins is absolutely a fit. And I don't think it's crazy if you were to sit here and say, hey, this is the pick at 28. Like, I just don't think it's that crazy because the Lions don't pick again until 60, and then they don't pick again until 102. So, like, I don't care how many times you do a mock draft simulator. Once you get out of the top of the draft, and this is really what I wanted to allude to kind of as we get ready to close up shop or however we wind down here, but the well starts to dry once you get past the Matthew Goldens, the Tet McMillans, the Abukes of the world, the Luther Burdens, which is why I think he's still intriguing at pick 28. But once you get past that, you then get into the Iowa State guys, which is Higgins and Noel, like we said. And then it just kind of falls apart from there. Like, you have Savion Williams from TCU. That's fine. He's okay. He's big. He's fast. He's like a prototypical X, but really played out of the slot, but he can't catch the football. He's got a terrible drop rate.
Well, that's a problem.
Right. That's part of the job. Then you've got Xavier Restrepo, or however you say his name, out of Miami, Florida. He's a great possession receiver, but he ran a 4.83 at his pro day. I think he's probably going to be a day 3 pick.
Yeah.
As Johnson, I don't know what you do with 154 pounds.
You pass.
Right. You pass here. You then get into the Pat Bryants and the Tay Feltons and the Ricky Whites of the world, the Isaiah Bonds of the world. But those are probably more day 3 guys. So I don't know.
To me, there are 2 players starting in, I would say, the mid toward back end of round 2 that intrigue me greatly, where I don't care so much about their redundancy with anybody on the offense. And one is Jack Bisch from TCU.
Yep.
I love his game.
Mm-hmm.
He has enough. There's enough stuff in his game. Like, just if the ball's in the air, it's generally speaking his, right? He's one of those guys. I think he's a really interesting route runner. I think he is a big slot type of player, which is becoming a kind of a popular player in the NFL world. But, you can find a way to deploy a bigger player who's dominant with the ball in the air and very detailed as a route runner. There's always a way to deploy that guy in an offense.
Absolutely.
Especially if we're talking about later, we're not talking about round 1 type guy. Right. So it's Bisch, who I think will be a good pro. And Alec Ayamanor from Stanford. It's very intrigued by him, but like, I feel like watching him, like, there are moments when I'm watching him, I feel like I need to go for a cup of coffee kind of thing, right? Like, it's hot and cold,
right?
Like, he'll do things and it's like, that's like, if you watch him play against Travis Hunter this year, and he just kind of eats him up.
Yep.
He does. But then there are also times with him when it's like, does he have the requisite athleticism that you're looking for? He's 6'2" and 205 range. I think he ran mid 4.4. So he's plenty of that stuff. But, I don't know. But to me, outside receiver who can block, who's really good blocking, but who has a combination of the height, weight, speed that you look for, the route running chops, all the things that you want. It's just you're not paying such a heavy price for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Higgins will not be available at pick 60.
Nope.
No way.
I don't think Noel will be either.
I don't know, but they're both going to be gone. So if you move out of the first round and you have pick 36, whatever, 38, whatever, cool. But I think Bisch is available in round 2, and I think Ayamanor is too. And those guys, I think, are really intriguing options because it's such a weird class after the top group. Yeah. It really is.
It is. It's a very fascinating group. And I will say this about the Stanford kid, Ayamanor, or however the hell you say his name. I butcher every name, so it is.
Oh, good.
If it's not John Smith, I'm screwed. But like, he kind of reminds me of Devontae Parker. And that terrifies me because he didn't create a bunch of separation, and he
Yeah.
had the length, and he was 6'3", 209. He ran a 4.45. I just thought, like to your point, very hot and cold. And there were times where I'm like, do something. Like, and I don't know if that wins over a scouting department or a front office or a coaching staff in Detroit if you're so hot and cold. Like, you've got to be, I think, a little bit more consistent. I don't think he is that consistent. But at the same point, he is a very talented receiver just from what he was able to do in college. He comes up with some really big grabs. He can high point the football, good body control, all the stuff that you're looking for. And to your point, like he did. He took Travis Hunter to school at times. So
Yeah.
I do wonder, like, do they value a guy like that? But past some of the names we're talking about, the well really does dry up. And
Yeah, I mean, I think Bisch is a round 2, dude, like late round 2.
Yeah.
Manor could be like at pick 102.
Yeah.
If they decide he's the guy they want to take and invest in this class at that position, I'm all on board with that.
Yeah.
But like, there's a world of difference between Jaden Higgins's game and Ayo Manor's game, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that Ayo Manor needs to put in. Some of it is like his hands are really, like, there are times when he struggles to catch the ball because technically he's not
doing it
advanced, right? Like, there's a problem, right? But
Yep.
you got to work some of that out. But it's more giving people a couple of receivers in a couple different rounds to look at outside of the big boys, right?
Yep.
So, if the Lions decide Jalen Noel's their guy, I'm gonna be very happy because again, his floor is so high. It's hard to see him totally failing.
Yeah.
I think similar things about Higgins. It's always harder though. I think it's harder in today's game to win outside and to be a big outside receiver than it is to be productive out of the slot. So that's kind of it, but I think they're both really good players. It'll be interesting to see what the Lions do specific to this position.
Yes.
And
because I do think it's a bigger need than anybody's ever talking about to this point of the draft season, of being a month out, like you said earlier. We have not, as a fan base, have really talked about this position. It's always been about corners, defensive ends, defensive tackles, interior offensive line.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're on to something, though, because, I mean, when has Brad Holmes really ever, outside of Hutchinson, or at least the year where it was Trayvon Walker and Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau together, you kind of knew the Lions were taking one of those guys, right?
Yeah.
Outside of that, he's sort of like charts his own course, and good for him.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at how they've constructed the roster up to this point, you've got 8 to 10 defensive linemen in total, edge rushers and defensive tackles that you're going to carry. That's pretty much set at this point, outside of maybe an edge rusher. You have your 4 or 5 linebackers. You have 5 or 6 corners and DBs.
Yeah.
5 or 6 corners. You're going to have 3 safeties. You probably need another safety.
Yep.
Then you go to you're looking already at 22, 23 players on the defensive side of the ball. Like, there's not much room left on that side to put your 53-man roster together. So,
yeah, I mean, they've done a really impressive job of developing the back end of this roster to where now look at the roster and think, all right, of all the picks in this year's class, how many really are going to come in and challenge to be productive at really on every level, or any level? I mean, like, there aren't, like, you would expect your first rounder to do something for you, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But you would hope that pick 60 does some things for you. But the rest is like, you feel it's almost developmental. Like, maybe not this year you're counting on them so much, but you're keeping those guys. It's just, for those guys, it might be a year or two out.
And that's
this is what happens when teams get really good.
And that's what they kind of went through last year. I mean, Arnold played a bunch, but Rakestraw played like 6 snaps. Wingo played a bunch, and then he didn't because he got hurt. We didn't see Manu at all. Like, there's some things that we just don't know, and that's going to happen probably in this draft. But picks 28, pick 60, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, the Lions, they kind of have to hit in year one with
Yep.
those guys to an extent in some way. And that's why I just wonder if the easy button for them is getting a pass catcher in here at 28. And
then there's the financials of it too. I mean, the idea of like receivers making $30+ million, and you've got one for 5 years paying him, 28th overall slot money. It's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah. No, it's going to be very intriguing. The market for the receiver position continues to get higher. So I don't think Amon-Ra is going anywhere, but if the price gets too high, it's going to get very interesting. So, yeah, I don't know. I thought wide receiver was a good position to talk about today and just get the wheel spinning for people.
Yeah.
If you get mad at us, you can follow us and send us the hate mail on X at Russ NFL Draft, at Bischoff_Scott. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, you can rate, review, and subscribe to the Detroit Lions podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your favorite shows. So he's Scott Bischoff. I'm Russ Brown. This has been Bischoff and Brown. We'll be back next week right here on the Detroit Lions podcast.